Well, hey, welcome to the Thrive Collective. Hey, entrepreneurs, business owners, leaders, friends, this is your podcast. This is your show. This is really designed to help you with ideas and practices that help you make more money, avoid costly mistakes, or somehow enhance your life or business, fully integrate your faith into what you do. And so we're really excited today to have a special guest with us. Miss Kimberly Bartz is here, Enneagram expert, a licensed therapist, and she's here to help us with tools and techniques and ideas that can help us navigate personal and professional stress. And as I'm thinking about that, there's a couple things that really come to mind. This week, my wife shared with me a scripture verse, and I want to start us off with that. It starts out of 1 Peter. 1 Peter 1, verse 6 says, "Be truly glad, there is wonderful joy ahead. Even though you must endure many trials for a little while," check that out, even though you must endure trials for a little while, "these trials will show that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold, though your faith is far more precious than mere gold. So when your faith remains strong through many trials, it will bring you much praise and glory and honor on the day when Jesus Christ is revealed to the whole world." And as we're in this Easter season and looking forward to in the next several days, week, to celebrating Easter, remember the truth here, that the trials that we face are temporary. This side of heaven, any trial that we should expect to endure really is there to test our faith. And if we'll lean into that with bold confidence and hold on to what is true, what is noble, what is righteous, we'll come out of that with faith muscle that's unstoppable on the back end. And this is true in business, the challenges that we deal with as entrepreneurs and business owners. There's a responsibility that we have. And the number one responsibility is not to go get more sales. The number one responsibility that we have is not even to lead our teams. The number one responsibility, the biggest gift that we bring to our business is our own individual transformation. We have a responsibility to always be growing, always be learning, always be leading into the difficult and learning through that. Seek wisdom. The Bible says wisdom is far more valuable than any ruby or gold can be. Seek wisdom. And many of you are here and listening and watching and listening to this podcast because of that exact thing. You are seeking wisdom. Wisdom is far more than knowledge. It's one thing to know what to do. Wisdom is knowledge applied, doing something with that. And so today we're going to be entering into a conversation that I hope brings wisdom to your business. The people you lead and even yourself, the person you look at in the mirror likely feels a sense of stress. And in this season, global pandemic, perhaps overload, anxiety, stress, worry. Well, where do you go with that? The Enneagram personality profile has been one of the most powerful tools that I've come across recently to identify our own unique tendencies and also that personality. Where do we go when we're on tilt? Where do we go when we're stressed out? Where do we go when we're healthy? The Enneagram provides the depth of understanding of that. And today, it is really exciting to have guest Kimberly Bartz with us to share how do we navigate stress according to your Enneagram type. My hope for today is that you leave with just a single tool, maybe just one thing that you can lean into to make the next weeks, months, as long as we're in this corona isolation, that much more effective for you. So with that, I'd like to invite Ms. Kimberly Bartz. Kim, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you and would just invite you to kind of take it from there. Introduce yourself to the Thrive community here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rob. I'm very, very happy to be here. this season is something that I would call a fish out of water experience. And in the Enneagram language, we know that you can gain a lot of self-awareness out of fish out of water moments. And if this isn't one, I don't know what is. This is the time that even if you're not certain about your Enneagram number, you might find some clarity because it is more obvious to us what our natural tendencies are. Right now, we are moving in instinctual ways where sometimes we might be more logical about it, but right now, this is the time that our body is taking over. So what I have for you today is a crash course on the Enneagram numbers and your stress line. There's a lot of questions about stress lines because there's a lot of different information. So I'm going to do my best to simplify this for you all. I drew this little picture that you may have heard. I don't know if you can all see that very well. But this is called levels of health. And this comes from Russo and Hudson's work. So in general, people are living out of the average to healthy place. Now, I just want to point out that these 1, 2, 3 is not your number. This is just levels of health. But the Enneagram system is a dynamic tool, meaning that as we go through our day and experience joyful moments and stressful moments, we move up and down in health. So on average, on a good day, we're on kind of this green area, average to maybe the lower side of healthy. Now, if you think that you are a healthy number, you're wrong. Nobody can stay up and healthy all the time. That's just the only person who might be able to do that would be Jesus. So this is where we typically work. Now, in true times of stress, we move all the way down to the unhealthy range where it's being excess in your number and it can become pathological. Today, I want to focus on this blue arrow, which is where we slide down from our normal coping mechanisms, average health, in times like these that are stressful and trying, to see how we can cope. Now, some people might think that your stress number sounds like a really negative word, but I want to change that for you. Your stress number isn't necessarily negative. Your stress number is the number that you need to move to in order to take care of yourself. That's really important because often it's related to shame or feeling bad that we have these instinctual moves to something that is not normally like us. I'm going to break down each number and give you, I'm going to call them warning signs. Think of it as your fire alarm system so that you know that something is happening in you that you need to take action. Think of it as an opportunity to catch yourself, recognize what's going on, change your actions, and then, make better choices for yourself.
So leaders,
go ahead, Rob.
I'm just saying, leaders, this is huge. Self-awareness. This tool brings self-awareness. It's so easy for us to be deceived in thinking that the way we see the world as leaders is exactly the way that other people see the world. That's false. We need to increase our self-awareness of our own unique tendencies and styles, but then leverage this tool to understand how your teams also handle stress and see the world through their eyes. So yeah. I just wanted to add that, Kim. This is powerful.
That's a really great reminder because there can be a tendency to look at other people and say, oh, look at what they're doing. But first and foremost, this is a tool to look at yourself. Actually, I tagged a little quote from this book from Beatrice Chestnut, which is really great, 9 Types of Leadership, if anybody wants to dive in deeper. But since you mentioned that, Rob, she, in this book, quotes Daniel Goleman's research from Harvard Business Review. She says that she points out that the key factors in high quality leadership are self-awareness, which is the ability to be mindful or conscious about what you do, how you do it, and why you do it. And then the second piece is emotional intelligence, or the ability to recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions, and the capacity to recognize, understand, and empathize. And she puts that under knowing what makes a leader successful. So today, really try to think about yourself and be paying attention to some of your reactions, okay? If you're not aware with stress lines, every number on the Enneagram is connected to 2 other numbers. These are sometimes referred to as your stress and security lines. Today, we're going to be mainly focusing on our stress lines because that's what we're talking about is stress. Both numbers are hugely helpful in your journey for self-growth. But today, since we have a limited amount of time, it's easiest to focus on one. So I shared with Rob a handout, we'll say, that you will each have access to that is a brief synopsis. Yeah, there we go, for each number. So we'll start at the top.
And if you'd like a copy of this, we'll mention this at the end of the podcast. Just go to hughesintegrated.com/stress. hughesintegrated.com/stress, and you could download this PDF on demand, use it, follow along. This is your tool, your resource to help you better understand this topic of Enneagram.
Mm-hmm. And also, I want to be mindful that right now, in this current feeling, we are all experiencing stress, but for some people, this might be experienced as trauma. And if this is traumatizing to you, then I encourage you to seek out professional help. These tools are for managing average stress. So just a little bit of insight in regards to this. This isn't meant to fix stress. This isn't meant to fix trauma, but these are to give us some tools to start. So with that, we'll start at the top. Ones move to a 4. And what that means is that you can access the energy of a 4. When you intuitively move to the 4, you're going to move to that number in the state of level of health that you are in your base number. So as a 1, if you are at an average space, you can move over to the average space of a 4. So if you're feeling a lot of stress, you're going to be noticing the low side of the 4, which is some of where these watch out for is moodiness, withdrawing, and melancholy. So if you are noticing that you go on that landslide, this is where you're going to catch yourself and move with intentionality to gently observe your feelings. Try not to assign judgment, and let them just be what they are. Your inner critic, which is one of the major things that sets apart a number 1, is judging you constantly about how you're feeling and what you're doing. But if you tap into the higher side of the 4, you can just let emotions be what they are. For 2s.
And I might just say, if Enneagram is a new concept to you, I would encourage that you, maybe even Kim, in the future, we could have you back on to do kind of an Enneagram 101. We are really assuming at this point that if you're listening to this, if you're intrigued by this, you're pretty aware of what your Enneagram typology is. But maybe, if there's an online assessment or something that you might steer us to, Kim, how might somebody find out what type number they are? What would you recommend for that?
So there's a couple that are out there. I would say be very careful with assessments. They can be good for narrowing down numbers and helping you think and pay attention to what your thoughts are.
Yeah.
The biggest thing about them is to just hold it loosely. Think of it as a place to start and not a definitive answer. So some of my favorites would be Riso and Hudson have a really long profile one that is probably the most well-known, and I think that one's $10. You can just Google it. So it's Riso and Hudson. It's called the RHISO. Then another favorite one of mine is by Jerry Wagner. It's called the WESPSS, I think. So if you just Google Jerry Wagner, his is also $10, and his is really interesting because it asks you to pick between 2 different words and which one you like better. There are also free ones, and there's lots of things out there. in general, my best advice is read some books. I love The Road Back to You. It's a great primer.
Yeah, Ian Cron's book, Road Back to You.
Yep.
Enneagram Institute. Have you ever seen the Enneagram Institute online? They've got an online assessment. It might be the Riso and Hudson that is actually sold through the Enneagram Institute as well.
I think it is.
Yeah. Yep.
So my best advice to you would be to start by thinking of yourself in your early 20s, because over the years, we gain more and more ways of dealing with the world. So if it's really fuzzy to you, think about yourself as a young adult and focus there.
That is a new perspective I had not considered with Enneagram. Think of yourself as a young adult. If I heard you right, if you've piled up coping mechanisms in your adult life, try to think back to before those started or where they were early onset of those mechanisms. Is that right?
Yep.
When you were your raw, authentic self. Wow, that's good.
Your early 20s is when it's the most obvious and you're living out of pretty much your pure instinct of personality.
Wow, that's good insight. So the 1 goes to 4 in stress.
Yep.
Okay, I work with a lot of 1s, love them. They're great people.
They are great people.
As a leader, I've got to recognize that a tendency might be for them to move to that 4, that very like, what would you call it? You said melancholy. That would be one of the potential moods that a 4 might display. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a little bit part of this too. So if you're reaching this bottom line, this is the point where other people can start to notice your behavior. Otherwise, typically, if you are working in more of the average space, people might not notice that you're really struggling.
Yeah.
So if you notice that, for example, a 1 is exhibiting those things, then you know that they're really struggling.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Okay, let's. So I'm curious now. The 2 is known as the helper. This is the person who just wants to carry your bags as you walk in from the grocery store. This is the person that just really wants to be super supportive and helpful. So where do they go in times of stress?
This is an interesting move. 2s move over to the 8, which is sometimes called the challenger. 2s typically, like you said, are very loving people of the heart triad or the feeling triad. They're the feeliest of all the feels. 2s are the people who are bringing you a casserole, calling you, writing you notes. But when they are overly stressed, they really lean into the 8. Now, yes, they will be able to access the high side of the 8. And again, this is the low side of the 8 that I'm talking about on here, which would be demanding behavior, controlling, being very blunt. And so I wrote that the intentionality for a 2 is to create boundaries by saying no to things that are not yours to do, to catch yourself before you move into that move. Creating boundaries is really important, but like anything else, if you go too far into creating boundaries, that's not healthy either. So these are all about balance.
So true or false? A 2 in times of stress might neglect self-care. Would you say that would be true? Because they're so focused on helping others and helping their family and helping, maybe that could be a case. So if I hear you right, setting boundaries of saying, okay, what is the appropriate amount of help that I could offer other people? But at the end of the day, like, you've also got to take care of yourself. Remind yourself that, because you don't want to go into a spin out. You don't want to go unhealthy. Take walks. In Michigan today, we have beautiful sunshine. Take a little 5-minute walk at lunchtime and feed your soul, is what we're saying here. That's beautiful.
Sure.
Love it.
One of my favorite authors is Brene Brown. I know she's big with everybody because she's incredible, but one of her favorite lines is that to be truly compassionate, you have to have boundaries.
Yeah.
If you can't fill yourself up and maintain, you'll have nothing to give.
Yeah. So good. So good. Okay, now it's going to get personal, Kim. Because you're talking here. I'm an Enneagram 3 I like to say in recovery because the unhealthy 3 has an ugly head and sometimes peeks itself out, especially in times of deep and like unending stress. So I'm just going to go and put earmuffs on for a minute as you talk about the 3 because it's very personal over here, very personal. So
All
help us
right.
out. What can my
Okay.
fellow 3s expect in times of heavy output, stress, anxiety? What does that look like?
So 3s, as we know, are sometimes called the achiever.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're called the performer as well. And typically they are all about efficiency, getting things done, being the face of the project. Sound familiar, Rob?
My assistant Cassie's on the call. She's probably out there shaking her head. Yes, yes,
She is
yes, yes, yes.
nodding.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. So this is also an interesting move. A 3 in high stress initially is going to push more into productivity. But when they start to reach the low side of the 9, it can look like disinterest, apathy, and complacency. Think of somebody who has just said, I give up. I don't even care anymore. It's not worth it. I've got nothing left to give. That's your warning sign. If you feel yourself sliding down into that, it's time to notice and pivot.
Ow, ow, ow. Dead nuts on. And that's exactly how I have felt. In fact, on Tuesday of this week, I had just a day where I felt like Rocky Balboa in the ring that just got beat up from a variety of different situations. And I think all of us are dealing with that. Every time you flip on the news, something new pops up, right? And it could just be fatiguing. At some point, though, yeah, this is true. So what can we do? What is our hope? What's our life preserver when we get that way?
So your intentionality would be to open yourself up to listening to the opinions of others, balancing some productivity with rest. So one thing that 3s often struggle with is the rhythm of rest and relax. Rest and relax. You can't produce and relax. You can't fully work and be effective if you're not resting. And so this is an opportunity to rest, but being careful to not go too far into the resting where it becomes apathy and complacency. So just like you talked about today, hey, my opportunity that's unique right now is that I can go outside and go for a walk with my family. That is a form of rest, rejuvenation.
So any 3 out there who's listening, here's what Kim is not saying. Kim is not saying, oh, but I really enjoy my work. I find it restful to do my work. I know who you are listening to this podcast. I know who you are because I've had that same reflection before. Well, what if I really like what I do and it is my thing? No, what she is talking about is different. You need to toggle into analog. 3s, listen, you need to go analog. Slow down the RPMs of your engine. You have to go and you have to sharpen that axe before you rush in and try chopping down more trees. You have to do it. And the stewardship mindset here, 3s, here we go. Get me preaching. Hoorah, give me my towel. Let's do this. 3s, let me talk to you. Here's the deal. If you go into overdrive and that becomes the tempo that you set, you will burn yourself out. You'll be the last that realizes it. Who will see it first will be your spouse, close friends and family. It'll be people who think they're expecting you to be listening to them with true empathy, and you're an empty shell looking back and nodding, thinking about a work project. I'm talking to you 3s. I know I am. You need to practice the spiritual discipline of rest. That is an act of worship. Because 3s, what happens? When you step off of productivity wheel, you acknowledge that we have a Heavenly Father that has always been keeping the world held together. It's not by your effort. 3s, hear me. You have permission to pause and rest. That is an act of worship, and that is an act of serving your family, your business, your team through rest. We need a healthy you. So there's my little, I know, yeah, go ahead. What's on with our 4s? But that is a word to you 3s.
Yeah. I'm reminded of the idea of Sabbath.
Yes.
God created Sabbath for a reason. And it's
Yes.
because he worked for 6 days, and then he said the seventh is for rest.
Yep.
And that
Come
goes
on.
for threes too.
That's good. So the fours, these are what's the description here? They're romantic. I have a hard time saying that, but it's probably true because they're thinking and reflecting and lamenting, but the four, the romantic, what do they do in times of stress, Kim?
So it's often called the romantic or sometimes the individualist.
Okay.
And romantic doesn't necessarily mean like, ooh, love. It can be more like romanticizing. So you might turn a situation into something that sounds like a movie because that makes it sound more intriguing and interesting to you. So a four's initial reaction to stress is going to be to withdraw further into themselves. However, when they're going to start accessing that lower side of the two, if they're really far in stress, this can look like people pleasing on the outside, jealousy, and wanting to be overly involved. Now, some people are going to say, hey, isn't that actually a positive thing? And that can be really tricky for fours because the motivation behind this isn't necessarily to be a loving person. It's the manipulative side of the two, where it's I'm going to earn somebody's love by doing these things. I can speak to a four because that's my number. And I know that when I am in my truly stressed phase, I can become clingy and be in people's space and can be kind of smothering because I'm going, okay, I'm your person. I'm the person that you're going to rely on. And that's not actually a healthy move. So the intention for a four is to pick one person in your circle of influence, a loved one, and be able to pour into them a little bit each day. Now, this isn't smothering. I'm not saying that, but sending a kind note to say, okay, I'm going to get out of myself right now and think about how somebody else might be struggling.
So good. So good.
Yeah. That's been a rough one because it's pretty easy for a four to be in my house and secluded, which is something that is generally comfortable for me. And so that's why it's an intentionality, because I have to choose to make this action. It doesn't come naturally to me. All right, fives. Fives are sometimes called the investigator, the wise one. Those are the two most common ones. And fives are your knowledge-based people who are keeping their fear at bay by having all the knowledge so that they can keep ahead of their fear. So fives are typically withdrawn from others, kind of isolated. One of my favorite quotes is, good fences make good neighbors. That's kind of a theme for fives. Private people. Sometimes people call them kind of like a hoarder of their resources, so they don't always share all of their information that they have. So when a five moves to seven, it's a really strange move because all of a sudden, this five is letting out some of this kind of odd humor to cope with things. Other people might say, hey, are you okay? And a five wanting to keep it to themselves is going, yeah, I'm good. I'm fine, as a way of holding other people out.
Isn't that interesting?
The move to seven can look like indulgent behavior, distractedness, and restlessness. So the intention for a five and that low side to bump it back up and to be able to connect with the higher side of five is to connect with a loved one, a person, a friend, somebody, and listen to what they think or suggest.
Kim, when you were just describing that, here's who I saw. I saw Willy Wonka. I don't know if this is true or not, but like the original Willy Wonka, like original movie, because he was such a
with Gene. Is
Gene
that who
Wilder.
that
Yeah.
is?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Okay.
So like deep thinking, and then super like crazy wild. Maybe that was him acting out in Seven. And then who did he really listen to? Was Charlie. Charlie. Like that was his attachment. I don't know if this is true, but I mean if that was actually like the Enneagram was in the backdrop of that movie, but it just felt like there might be a little bit of that eccentricness that pops out. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe that's a whole other conversation, but that was very vivid.
It
So
could
5
very well
moving to
be.
7.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Or if anybody is a fan of Parks and Recreation, the characters on that show actually line up very well with each number. And Nick Offerman's character, I forget his name, he's the boss, is a 5. And when he is in high stress, he starts eating a bunch of steak, drinking, kind of being, I guess, loosey-goosey with his sharing with other people. And he goes, I can't believe I just shared some of that.
Oh man, so 5 moving to 7. That does seem like an odd transition, but it absolutely is what happens under stress. So what about for the 6 here now as we kind of talk through 6, 7, and 8? I know many of you have got questions. We want to leave some time to be able to answer those. So
Yeah,
tell us about the
I'll try to
6
go
here, Kim.
faster. Okay, I do want to say for our lovely 6s, this is a very special message to you because 6s, like no other number, are concerned about the common good. Right now, 6s might be feeling some of this the most because they're already highly aware of stress and fear. And so in this time, when some of that stress and fear is very, very real, this is a hard place for them. So I just want to make sure that 6s are listening and taking extra care of yourselves because you, like no others, might be more likely to experience this in a traumatic way. So 6s, they move to a 3. Now the low side of the 3 is becoming a workaholic. I have hoarding resources in quotations because, well, it's a personal thing, probably. Hoarding is a really strong word. But what that means is trying to gather accolades, looking like you're doing really well, projecting that image of being in control, just like a 3. So what we want to do is catch ourselves, change that perspective, and then make an intentional move so that we can access the higher side of the 3. So the intentional move for a 6 would be to make a decision and stick to it despite self-doubt. Take an action even if it's small. Because what this does, 6s are bombarded with their own thoughts. Everything right now, all these news sources coming out, what they've got to do. If you're at home teaching kids, how am I going to manage this? It's a cloud, it's a blur. So you got to pick one and stick to it and see it through so that you can start to feel like you're getting a gauge of what is up and what is down.
Yeah, so good. I've seen that. I've seen the 6. I'm married a 6. Heather's a 6. She would tell you that. And yes, we do also in the hoarding resources. We got 2 Kirkland packs of toilet paper in the house just in case. So there is that.
I'm coming
But,
knocking on your door, Rob.
aside from that, I will tell you that even before COVID-19, before all this issue was taking place, when it's times of stress are the times where I would see her going around and kind of like doing spring cleaning in November or in December and kind of buzzing around the house and kind of doing things around the house. It's just like staying busy, doing laundry, like trying to stay busy. So yeah, that is a stress kind of behavior of the 6.
Absolutely.
And I think if she were on the call, she would say her quiet times have been her lifeblood right now. Pausing to not just do more to get rid of the stressful feeling, because that really doesn't, it just covers it up, but really release the feeling. I heard a wise counsel one time say, emotions require motion. Emotions need motion. And so for her, it's journaling or talking with her accountability partner or praying about them and just releasing them. So it's not a matter of trying to effort them away, but rather really metabolizing them. So
Mm.
as a word to the sixes. So yeah,
And
so
that's
good.
a great little tag to remember that emotion needs motion. We even think about that with anxiety. In order to address anxiety, you have to have that physical motion to get
Yeah.
the hormones out of your body, get that adrenaline out.
So good.
All
So the
right,
sixes. Okay, now sevens. These are the
7.
enthusiasts, right? These are the Pied Pipers.
These are the Pied Pipers, the 7s, the people who are making plans, plan A, plan B, plan C. These are our silver lining people. They're our delight and our joy. Um, and their first move would be to keep themselves busy as well. But then that intuitive move to 1 looks like being rigid, critical, pessimistic. Now, I've heard some 7s say that they actually really like this move to 1 because they get stuff done. So they can be procrastinators until the very end, and then all of a sudden have this really great burst of productivity. But then they kind of rest in those accolades for a while, and then they say, okay, I did my piece. So the intention for the 7 would be to find balance between dreaming and doing, and seeing a task through from start to finish.
Ooh, you hear that, sevens? Finish.
Finish.
Start you have down. You're good at starting.
Yes.
Completion. Sorry, seven's like my number 2 issue, like my second highest Enneagram type. So I also confess I relate to this a little bit.
Yep.
Wow. Okay, all right. So keep us going here. 8s
All right.
and the 9s, and then we're gonna open the floor at the end of these two to the folks that are on the call with us to ask your questions. So go ahead, Kim.
Okay, so 8s are challengers. 8s get things done. These are the people on the Enneagram that have the most energy. These are the people that walk into the room and you can just feel the energy emanating off of them. That's why their deadly sin is lust. Not like sexy time lust, but lust for life, lust for feeling and experiencing. To feel is to feel alive. So their move to a 5 is, so the 7, 5, 8 connection, where all those numbers are connected, are some of the oddest on the entire Enneagram. When 8 moves to a 5, when it is done intuitively, it can look like withdrawing, detaching from all feelings, and becoming super wary that other people are going to betray them. So this is a move that can look like anger. Now, the trick to this one would be, instead of moving out of an anger, it would be to intentionally set aside time every single day for alone time, whether that's 5 minutes or 10 minutes to regroup, whether that's letting my friend and mentor, Sister Ann Walters, is an 8, and she talks, her suggestion to me this week was, let out a primal scream. And I thought that was so funny. And I was like, well, can mine be more of like a primal, like gut-wrenching cry? And she's like, yeah, just let out your emotions. But she takes time every single day to to feel the emotion and to process it so that she can re-engage with people and be a leader.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Just let out that scream. I think of Braveheart. Just get it out. And it's so interesting. In an 8 typically is so confident, right? They're just like this like knight in shining armor type personality where they just like have an answer for everything. But then they go to this like being wary of betrayal and suspicion in an unhealthy space. That is an interesting dichotomy there. Interesting.
It is.
Okay, and now the 9.
Last but not least, I always feel bad that, maybe I should starting with 9s, because I kind of feel bad because the whole idea of the 9 or the peacemaker, sometimes called the mediator, are people who feel like their voice doesn't necessarily really matter. So they have an opinion, but they can feel very stuck between the opinions of everybody around them. They look at this person and say, oh, I can see that point of view. but I can also see that point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And so they are extremely loyal, wonderful people. Also, some of the most stubborn, quietly stubborn. I'm married to a 9, so it's okay if I say that. I know no one who has more of that passive aggressive stubbornness than my husband. But they move to the 6 and stress. And what that can look like then is overcommitting to like community tasks, taking things on, becoming more rigid in their thinking. Sometimes the low side of 6 can be very dogmatic, like so rule following. These would be the people who are calling. If you think about the people in a baseball field, 6 are the people who are in the stands calling, that's a penalty, okay? And they might start to mistrust others. There's 6s have a relationship with authority where they either kind of trust them or don't trust them, and that's where the 9 moves to on the low side of the 9. Now, if we're going to be intentional so that we can shift up into the high side of the 9, the high side of the 6, this is a great time for 9s because they can use their voice to speak up for the common good. Where sometimes it might be really hard for a 9 to speak their voice on behalf of themselves, they are so concerned about justice that it's much easier to use their voice to speak out for the health and goodness of others.
So good. 9 types of the Enneagram. Each one of these types, I know as you were walking through those, every one of us felt like, ooh, that's me, or I'm a little bit of this one. And as you're listening to this podcast, you may relate to something that Kim is saying about these different types and about how you are handling stress yourself. So, Kim, I got to just say thank you. This is incredible information. We're gonna pass kind of the microphone around here. If you're on the call now, I'm going to start with taking live questions. Vanessa, we'll start with you. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute you and just would welcome you to ask a question. And then after Vanessa, I'm going to open the floor for Maggie, and then we'll see what we have for time after that. So Vanessa, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks again, Kim. It's been really insightful. So I'm a 7-8, wing 8, and when I think about stress, I relate more to the 8 than to my own number 7. I do agree, like when I'm stressed, I do get a lot of things done, but it's usually like a bulldozer, like move out the way. But with the 8, I have found that, especially during this time with where the world's at, I have found so much strength and so much rest in stepping away from people and from just things. And I've been getting to hear more from the Lord, really, during this time. Can you talk a little bit about that, like in regards to wings? Because I'm sure there's people like, oh, I can relate to this and I can relate to that. And I've heard it say that we're all the numbers. You know, we have all the numbers, but of course we have our top 2 to 3 that we can look at. Why is it that I can identify with the 8 more than my 7 right now during this
Sure.
time?
Yeah, I'd love to address that. So the idea is that if this is a growth tool, that we could eventually be able to access all of the numbers. What your Enneagram type is the number that you default to, or your primary type. This type is typically formed already by the age of 5. Now, I'm not saying go and type your kids because that is more detrimental than helpful. However, it's fascinating that is the time in development where we are gaining all of these coping skills and really living into that number and figuring things out. Now, where wings come in is kind of like your individual flavor. So you might be like a 7 with a little bit of spice of 8. And some people might be right smack dab, like spread between your 2 numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And then some people might have no number or no wings.
Oh.
There are some Enneagram teachers who will say that earlier in life, you typically have like 1 chicken wing,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can develop that and then grow your second wing so you can fly.
Oh,
So that's kind of interesting. So right now, if you identify somewhere kind of right between that 7 and 8, that means that the 7 is your primary motivation, but that you reflect some of the qualities of your 8. And that's okay that you connect right in there. That's a strong line for you. I would love to do another podcast on accessing your inner team, because we do have direct lines to our stress and our health lines, our security line, and as well as our wings. So right there, in a time of making a decision, you have 4 numbers that you have direct access to right around you to help you make decisions.
4 numbers. Okay, what do you mean by 4? So our main number, and then
Yep.
Oh, and then our next wing.
So I guess technically 5. Yeah, you've got your chicken wings. I see Rob doing the chicken wings. So those are 2.
So for
and
a
then,
7, it would be 7, 8, 6, 1, 5.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Great self-awareness, though.
See, Heather's always told me that she thinks I have multiple personality disorder. Now I could actually put numbers to it. Yes.
There you go.
All right, my inner team. So, hey, Vanessa, thanks so much. It's always a joy to interact with you. Maggie, I'm going to come to you next. I've unmuted your microphone if you'd like to ask him a question. Let's see. Did I inadvertently not do Maggie? Pardon me. Maggie, are you there?
Let's see. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes. Yep. You must be
Great, there we
calling
go.
from. Are you calling from Verizon Wireless?
Sure, maybe. I don't know.
I can hear you now. Go ahead. Oh, wait, no, I can't. I just bless my heart. Okay. Welcome to the
right.
COVID Crazy Show. You're on with Kim.
It's been pretty wild, I'll say that. I, for one, am a 2 wing 1. As I mentioned in the comments, I am that casserole lady that if something goes wrong, I have this tendency to bring things over to people and see how they're doing instead of that quality self-care, although over the years I've gotten better with the self-care bit. Kim, I really liked you mentioning boundaries, not just setting them, but that you can get to a point where you maybe set too many boundaries. Like you touched on that a little bit, and I wanted to ask a little bit about that, because as a 2, I tend to jump to the 8 in times of stress. And I think what you'd said earlier is that we do jump to these numbers in stress, but at some points it can still be helpful if we use it properly. And I've found that Enneagram 8 can be helpful to kind of demand boundaries in ways that I can be a little bit of a challenger when I haven't been protecting myself as much. But that you have to be careful not to go too far and demand too many things and be unhealthy about it. So I guess what's your take on finding that balance of the quality side of your stressed out number, and maybe talk about boundaries, because I mean, no matter what your number is, having healthy boundaries is a big, important issue.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you mentioned, a 2 does move to the 8 in times of stress. And the low side of that 8 is somebody who is going to be very demanding, controlling, not very flexible around boundaries. So it might become all boundaries, or certain situations might trigger you to go, oh, this falls into that category. And now that would go for any number where we kind of chain events together where they remind us of something else. But especially for a 2, and this is kind of some of Suzanne Stabile's language, is chaining, and 2s do that especially, where they're connecting every single event that has ever happened to them in this big long chain. So something totally unrelated to maybe previous situations might trigger you to go over time into these boundaries. That's an intuitive move. You're not really thinking about it, but it is absolutely a self-protection. So I would say that there's no hard and fast way of knowing, but if you're feeling like you have to create these boundaries out of a sense of, well, I would say fear, then just be very cognizant of whether you're chaining it to something else. And then that's where you're going to pivot and use your intentionality to move to the high side of 8, which is, yes, you can say no to things that, here's the key word, to things that are not yours to do. But that doesn't mean that there aren't things that are yours to do. Does that help?
So good. Yes. Maggie, I'm sorry, I muted you just for audio background, but feedback?
Yeah, that's really great. I hadn't heard of the chaining aspect, but as you're talking about it, I'm shaking my head going, yep, I totally link things together, whether they're related or not. And then it becomes this giant fence of related things that I should just turn away.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's great.
Good.
So 1s, 2s, and 6s chain. And like I said, that comes from Suzanne Stabile. Her podcast on the Enneagram journey is awesome. I recommend that.
I'll tell you,
you can hear more about it there.
I could see a future podcast in our future here, Kim, because I could see so many good topics we could go on for rabbit trails here.
Ooh, I would love that.
Chaining could be one in and of itself. And, business owners, this is important stuff, because this is not only for ourselves and our own personal health, but also for the teams that we lead. Bringing this information, even sharing Kim's wisdom through this podcast, could be a real way that you serve your people to better understand their own self-awareness. And as they're kind of sitting at home waiting for work to restart again, this could be really, really good information for them. Hey, we got one last question coming in from Cassie. Cassie, you want to go ahead? You're on with Kim.
Sure. I'm a 1 and my husband is a 9. And so I feel like I'm really hard driving on my opinions. But I just, especially when we're in close quarters right now, do you have advice on how to make sure that his opinions are heard? I just feel like I struggle with, I feel like I'm doing him a favor by making all the decisions because he's passive, but then I stress that I'm really just not giving him a voice. So I don't know, there's tension there.
Yeah. And the 1-9 combo is interesting in that, because you do have somebody who is typically more strongly opinionated and one who is more likely to just follow along. However, I think creating a space for him to be able to make decisions is key. And so what I mean by that is, it can be something small like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this today. Do you have an opinion, or do you mind if I just take the lead? Sometimes a 9 doesn't necessarily know right in the moment. 6s and 9s need some time to think. So if there's something really big coming up, you might say, I would really love your honest opinion about this. Can we come back in a day or so after you've had some time to think through it and meet together? If you put them on the spot, that's going to be a hard conversation to have.
Mm-hmm. That's helpful. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And then what was the other one that chains? 1, 6s, and what's the other
1,
one?
2s, and 6s.
1, 2s. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I got to tell you, Kim, this is awesome. The Enneagram is such a powerful tool, number 1, for self-awareness, but number 2, for how to interact with others.
Yeah.
And we could do that from a healthy place or an unhealthy place. And without intentionality, I bet we could all guess, listeners, where we tend to drift. Without intentionality and a purpose-driven kind of approach, we're going to drift into degrading into that unhealthy place. So get yourself out of there. Apply these 9 tools, principles that Kim laid out. Again, if you'd like a download of this PDF that she shared with us today on the podcast, simply go to hughesintegrated.com/stress, and you can download this tool there. For our LinkedIn members, we're also going to be making all of the resources and direct links to the online Enneagram assessments and tools and resources available in our Thrive Collective community. If you'd like to apply for membership, they're absolutely free. This is your space to create ideas and exchange value with one another. The Thrive Collective on LinkedIn is the online community where we'll be posting many of these resources as well. Hey, Kim, if people want to have a conversation with you, I know you're a licensed professional counselor, a therapist, you do teletherapy, especially in COVID-19 season. They can meet with you through video screen, much like this. Is it best for them to email you, to call? How would they get in touch?
I would say right now it's probably best to email, only because I have little ones running around in the background, and so I need to step aside for a while, and that can be a little bit hairy. So if you email, it's much easier for me to go in, think about it, answer it. My email is at the bottom of that PDF, but it's also just Kim@KimberlyBartz, that's with a Z.com.
Excellent. So Kimberly Bartz, thank you so much for investing this time with the Thrive Collective. Hey, we look forward to seeing you on a future episode. Again, I think there's a lot of good opportunity for us to go on to other topics as well. So
I would enjoy
remember,
that.
yeah,
Thank you
so
for having me.
Thank you so much. And remember, the Thrive Collective, this entrepreneurs, business owners, leaders, and friends, this is your podcast designed to help you with ideas that help you make more money, avoid costly mistakes, which I think the Enneagram, if you do it the wrong way, I mean, this helps you to avoid the costly mistakes. So make more money, avoid costly mistakes, and fully integrate your faith into your life in leadership. We look forward to seeing you and speaking with you at the next one. So thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.